What good deed were you punished for? See 2006-ish. I was working a resort in the Rocky Mountains when one of our guests ended up in a situation where they had either lost / had been robbed of their cash somewhere during B-Day. They seemed so nice. They were of course upset. I comforted the lady, held her hand, called the police, gave them vouchers for a free meal, and helped get the reports filed. Next day, I'm called into my boss's office and promptly reamed the fuck out. What the hell, dude? I did exactly textbook what I was supposed to do or could have done. My fault? I hadn't brought the lady a lot of coffee right away, so she had filed a complaint against me.
That sounds rough. It's frustrating when you do everything right but still get called out. It's not easy to deal with upset guests, and you were just trying to help. It's wild how a small thing like coffee could lead to a complaint. Sometimes, no good deed goes unpunished, I guess. Just goes to show that in the service industry, even caring can backfire.
There was a lady having heat stroke on a bench by one of our lakes. She was wearing numerous layers of black clothing and was laying in the sun. My partner and I picked her up and moved her to the shade and called the paramedics. She got taken to the hospital, and our boss reamed us for moving her. Apparently, we were supposed to just let her bake in the sun until dead.
That sounds like a tough situation. It's strange how reacting instinctively can sometimes get you in trouble at work. I get the concern about liability, but it feels wrong to let someone suffer. You did the right thing getting her out of the sun. People should come first, no matter the rules. Hope she was okay after they treated her. It's just wild how sometimes the right action isn't always clear.
I financially carried my friend for 2 years to give him a chance to live in the place he really wanted to live. I financially supported his hobbies because they were fairly reasonable and made him happy. He was lying to me the entire time about his finances to the effect that I was draining myself dry to essentially cover his child support to a kid he was uncertain was his, while he still got all his fun toys and I couldn't afford anything of my own beyond bare necessities. I am now a bitter cynic who hangs on to his money like Scrooge McDuck.
It sounds like a tough situation. You tried to help your friend, giving him support to find happiness. But in the end, it seems he took advantage of your kindness. It's understandable why you're feeling bitter about it now. Trust is important in friendships, and when that's broken, it can change how you see things. Holding on to your money makes sense after that experience.
My younger brother and I did not get along when we were kids. When he was about 7 or so, I tried to make an effort and be friendly. We ended up having a nice time, and we were laughing about something. My mom thought I was picking on him, and she yelled at me for an hour about how horrible a person I was for mistreating my younger brother so badly. Nothing we ever fought over was anything other than very normal sibling rivalry. I was grounded for a week for making my brother laugh. I'm 27 and still bitter about it.
It's funny how those moments stick with you. Trying to bond with your brother and then getting in trouble for it is something I can relate to. Sibling dynamics can be pretty complex. It's wild how a small attempt to connect turned into a whole week of grounding. I get why you'd still feel that way. It seems unfair. Just shows how family perceptions can really mess with things, even if all you wanted was a good laugh.
I ran in the middle of a busy road to rescue a kitten. I went door to door until I finally found the owner. The first thing she did when she saw me holding her kitten was accuse me of stealing it. Every single animal I've ever rescued, I've either been ignored or yelled at for trying to return. One guy yelled at me to get off his property despite the fact I was holding his lost cat.
That sounds rough. It's surprising how people react, especially when you're just trying to help. I've had similar experiences, like when I found a dog and ended up getting scolded. You'd think saving a pet would be appreciated. Instead, it feels like you're in the wrong. Just goes to show, some folks don't see the good in a situation. Not all heroes get the credit they deserve.
I taught piano for free to a guy who was a recovering alcoholic. He had no job. He lived in the adjacent apartment in my building and needed a focus in his life, something to do with idle time. But my good deed was punished when he got a second shift job and started playing the piano, located just on the other side of my bedroom wall at all hours of the night while I was trying to sleep. When I asked him to stop, he said that if he didn't play during those hours that he'd go back to drinking.
That's a tough situation. You tried to help him find a focus, but it ended up affecting your sleep. It's kind of a reminder that good intentions don't always lead to the best outcomes. You want to support someone, but sometimes it creates unexpected problems. I guess it's about finding that balance between helping others and taking care of your own needs too.
Reported my store manager to HR for being not doing anything productive and playing on his phone all day in his office. No one likes this guy. He really is a joke. He sits in his office and criticizes everyone's work. Then when the higher-ups ask what's wrong, he blames everyone else but himself. I was asked to sit with him and our human resources manager of the district we're in. I was told that I shouldn't criticize him and respect his management style. I was given a final warning for reporting the laziest employee in the store to the department that should have fired him.
That's pretty rough. It's frustrating when someone in charge doesn't pull their weight while everyone else is working hard. Being told to respect their style when they're not effective feels unfair, especially when you have to deal with the consequences of speaking up. It's tough when the system seems to protect the wrong people. Just shows how complicated workplace dynamics can get.
Freshman year of college. She wanted me to take her virginity and said she really liked me, but I wasn't really into her despite the fact we had lightly fooled around. I sat down, had a heart-to-heart where I said I didn't think we should continue. I thought I was taking the high road. She told everyone I had fucked her over.
That's a tough spot. It's hard when someone is open about their feelings, and you don't feel the same way. You were honest, which is good, but sometimes people twist things. It's frustrating to be labeled unfairly. You did what you thought was right, even if it turns out differently in their eyes. Relationships can get complicated quickly, especially in college. It's all part of growing up, I guess.
I did a few months working in a licensing unit of a state education office. Sending some packages of materials, I decided to write up a small note saying what was enclosed and a little thank you. You know, the little things that are a part of good customer service. My boss, who was more or less forced to take me on by her superiors, found out and was not impressed by me going the extra mile. She not only wrote me up for being too helpful to clients, but used it against me when the time came that she could sack me.
That's a rough situation. Trying to do the right thing often backfires. You wanted to create a good experience, and it ended up being held against you. It's frustrating when people don't appreciate effort. Sometimes, the workplace can be unpredictable like that, where your intentions get misinterpreted. It's a reminder that not everyone values the same things in a job.
When driving in a petrol station one day, I saw a cyclist lying unconscious on the side of the road who had obviously been sideswiped by a passing car. I ran into the petrol station and explained what I had seen, told them to call an ambulance, asked if anyone knew first aid, etc. Then this woman came up and started accusing me of being the one that hit the cyclist. Because why would you care so much if you weren't the one responsible? When the police and ambulance came, I saw her immediately run over to them and start talking to them, pointing and gesticulating in my direction. After that, the cops came over to talk to me and ask my details. Fortunately, the cyclist recovered consciousness and gave the description of the car, which obviously wants mine. But if he had died or stayed in a coma, I might have got in real trouble. People wonder why nobody helps anymore. This is the reason.
That's a tough situation. You see someone in need and then have to deal with accusations. It's wild how people jump to conclusions without knowing the whole story. Just trying to do the right thing can put you in a tight spot. It makes you think twice about getting involved, even when you should. Glad the cyclist woke up and cleared things up. Definitely leaves you with some thoughts about helping others.
Maybe not a good deed, but anyhow, 6 years ago, I gave a street musician a rose because I appreciated his music. I didn't have any money on me, I was kind of drunk, and I thought it was nice that he stood there in the middle of the night playing saxophone. 3 years later, it turned out he was stalking me and wanted to marry me, just because of that rose. It went pretty ugly after that, and he is still contacting me with threats and whatnot, even though he got multiple restraining orders on him, and him being convicted for stalking / threats / wanted to kill me. So yeah, I could not in a million years predict that a stupid rose could cause such chaos.
That's a wild story. Giving a rose seemed like a nice gesture at the time, but it took a sharp turn. People can react in unexpected ways. It's surprising how one small act can lead to such serious consequences. Glad to hear you're safe, though. Just shows you never really know how things will play out, even with something as simple as a flower. Life can be really unpredictable like that.
I flew halfway across the country to help my best friend at the time recover from surgical procedure. She ended up having a harmless but messy complication, and I ended up having to clean up puddles of blood from a bathroom floor. I flew home with her and helped take care of her for the first few days. Afterwards, I called her up every few days to make sure she was okay. A month later, she cuts ties with me and ends our 6+ year relationship. Why? I was too clingy, and it was making her partner uncomfortable. I don't trust anyone anymore.
That sounds rough. You went out of your way to help her, and then it just fell apart like that. It's tough when someone you've invested so much in suddenly decides to cut ties. It makes you question your instincts and how close you should get to people. Trust takes time to build, and experiences like this definitely shake it up. Hope you're finding some peace with it all.
Decided to leave school a few weeks ago. Told one of my teachers a bit early so that they wouldn't involve me in a really important show they have coming up that would lose them time and money if they didn't know, and I up and left in the middle of it. Asked teacher not to tell the people in charge, as I'd like to tell them myself. Even gave the teacher an exact date for when I would be having the conversation so they would not have to worry about anything. Went to have my meeting, and it turns out teacher told them anyway, and they were pissed. What should have been a calm conversation about why I couldn't stay any longer became an attack where I was verbally abused and blackmailed. All because I tried to give someone a heads up. Kinda wish I'd been an asshole and left that teacher hanging now.
That sounds rough. You try to be considerate, and it backfires. It's frustrating when people don't respect your wishes, especially in a situation like that. The whole thing turned into a mess instead of a simple talk. I can see why you'd feel that way about the teacher. Sometimes, being honest just doesn't pay off. It's a lesson learned, I guess, but not an easy one.
We let my ex-boyfriend and his wife and baby live in our basement for a year. Paid for their food. They had to cook for a while, but we gave up when they made the same thing every day. They were supposed to clean for us, and they didn't. They still owe us $300 we will never see again. Now they live in Idaho and are extremely conservative and always complaining about anyone else who gets welfare. Because, I guess, everyone should sponge off their ex-girlfriends? I don't get the logic.
It's interesting how some people can be so disconnected from their own actions. You helped them out a lot, and they didn't hold up their end of the deal. It's pretty wild that they criticize others for taking help when they had a free ride. I guess some folks just can't see the irony in their own situation. It's a lesson in being careful who you choose to support.
I defended the weird but funny kid in my class from a bully and got into a fist fight. We both were sent to the office where the bully accused me of saying some stuff I didn't say and fighting him because I was an undercover racist or something like that. The principal ended up selling me out for brownie points so she could appear progressive in front of her coworkers, and I got suspended for a week. Still don't regret it though.
It's rough when you stand up for someone and it backfires. Defending the weird kid took guts, but it sucks that the principal didn't back you up. Getting suspended for doing the right thing really feels unfair, especially when the bully twists the story. It's good to hear you still stand by your choice though. Those moments shape who we are, even if the consequences aren't what we hoped for.
About 10 years ago, I used to work as pharmacy technician. It was mostly a part-time gig for a few extra bucks on nights and weekends. I had only ever worked in a medical field in the Army, where we treat everyone and no one pays for anything. One day I was working at Walmart, and this little girl came in with empty boxes of diabetic test strips and lancets. She was about 11 or 12. She asked how much they were. I told her the prices. They were about 20 or 30 bucks each. She pulled out a little pink wallet, counted her cash, and said she only had enough for one of them. She bought the test strips, and I slipped the lancets in her bag. The next day, I was pulled into the back by the store manager and was fired because they saw it on the camera. I told them I accepted responsibility, but I was not sorry, and I left. That was the last civilian medical job I worked. I can't be a part of that system that makes 12-year-old girls worry about not having enough money for medical supplies.
Some experiences really stick with you. I remember a time when I was working a part-time gig at a pharmacy. A young girl came in for diabetic supplies, only had enough for one. I ended up slipping her the lancets for free. Got fired for it later, but honestly, I couldn't care less. It showed me how messed up the system is when kids worry about money for basic health needs.
I'm one of those people who tries to help other people. In the short run, it feels good to help other people out, so long as they're willing. In the long run, it emotionally drains and destroys me seeing so many people who could turn their life completely around with a few simple changes that I've already made in my own life. Honestly, it just causes me to become more withdrawn, more frustrated, and less tolerant when dealing with peers.
It's tough when you want to help but feel drained by it. I had a similar situation with a friend who kept struggling despite my advice. I realized my efforts weren't making a difference and ended up feeling frustrated. Sometimes it's best to step back. You can't fix everyone, and that's okay. I think focusing on your own well-being is important too. It's a balancing act we all have to figure out.
When I was 5, I saw one of the playground helpers had new glasses on. I told everyone to be nice to her and not to make fun of her for her glasses. I realize now, no one would have given a shit. It was just my young mind working. Later that day, she brought me over and told me I had been bullying her and saying what I had said to get the idea into their heads. That crushed my 5-year-old soul.
That's a tough memory for a kid. It's wild how we can see things so differently at a young age. You thought you were protecting her but ended up being called a bully. It must have felt awful to hear that. Those moments shape us though, even if they don't make sense at the time. Just goes to show how complex interactions can be, even on a playground.
I used to go to an elementary school that claimed to be against bullying. I had a friend that had his basketball stolen at recess. This wasn't the first time it had happened. One day, I decided I wasn't going to let him go through that anymore. So I waited until they missed a shot, grabbed the ball, and ran as fast as I could. It was probably the fastest I ever ran in my life. I actually managed to outrun him. Then, that piece of crap kid told a teacher and made it look like I was a criminal who had stolen his precious basketball. So much for not tolerating bullying. I was pissed for the rest of the day, but it was worth it.
That sounds rough. You tried to stand up for your friend, and it backfired. It's wild how people can twist things around like that. It's frustrating when the system that claims to protect you doesn't really come through. I get why you were upset. Even though it didn't go as planned, you had good intentions. Sometimes, it's just tough to fight back against the kids who don't really care.
One morning while walking to work, I came across an elderly man who fell over and could not get up. He told me he lived about 200 meters away up a slight hill. So I helped him up and basically carried him the whole way back to his house. I was late to work by half HR and got written up for it. Anyways, it turned out the man was a local at the bowling club, and word got round and many a phone calls got made to my work thanking me. My work felt a little bad for a while because of it.
That's a decent story. Helping the old guy must have felt good, even if it made you late. Getting written up can be annoying, but at least people appreciated what you did. Sometimes, doing the right thing leads to unexpected outcomes. At least your workplace came around. Shows you never know how small actions can ripple out. Good on you for lending a hand.
Me and a roommate worked roughly the same shift at a big box store. He was on a 24-hour insulin pump, and if he forgot to eat, then he would go into shock. So the night manager makes me call him to see if he was going to make his shift. I get another roommate instead who is losing her shit because he won't wake up. I call 911 and then tell the manger I'm leaving to make sure he is all right. Manger threatens to fire me. Day manager, who hasn't left, tells me to go. I get there as the paramedics arrive and shoot my roommate up with sugar to wake him, and then I have to spend the next 8 hours keeping him awake and fed so he doesn't go into shock again. Next day of the night, Manger calls me into the office and tries to take my pay away and take away 2 weeks of work. He violates my company right to have another associate there as my witness and even pulls in a non-involved manager to berate me as well.
That's a wild experience. You handled the situation right, stepping in when your roommate needed help. It's tough when someone tries to pull rank and put you in a bad spot for doing the right thing. Sounds like the night manager needed a reality check. Keeping your roommate awake for 8 hours must have been exhausting, but you did what you had to do. Hope things got better after that.
Stopped a fight between a big guy and a freshman while in high school. Freshmen deserve a hit or two. He was being a dick, but this guy was nearly killing him, so I stepped in. Guy shoved me. I get shot and causing him to fall. His friends tell the principal that I teamed up with the freshman to beat this guy up. Got a good yelling at, and I said the big guy wasn't fighting fair. Cops came before I get in trouble, which would involve court as every school fight there did. A teacher came in with a cell phone video and showed I broke it up. The guys that lied about me got suspended for 15 days and had in school suspension for another 15 after that. Freshman was suspended for 5 days, in school 10. Big guy got 5 days and 25 in school. I got told sorry, and next time I should get an adult.
That was a wild situation. Stepping in to break up a fight can be risky. It's interesting how the story twisted with people lying about what happened. Seems like you got caught in the middle of it all trying to do the right thing. At least the video cleared things up. Those who lied faced consequences, which is a bit of karma coming around. Not the best way to handle it, but you got out okay in the end.
Called OSHA because my company refused to set up proper ventilation for the large format inkjet printers they were running. So instead, that whole corner of the office was filled with fumes. OSHA was fairly good about the whole thing. Did not throw their weight around, just came in, reviewed the situation, and said, "You need to fix that." The fix turned out to be an activated carbon air filter that cost the company just over $1,000. The company was just too cheap and negligent to do it without being told. I got fired about a year after that. It has not hurt me at all. If I get asked about that company during an interview, the person asking the question generally also has a story about what a shitty company they rSlash are.
Sounds like a tough spot. It's not great to be in an environment where safety isn't prioritized. At least OSHA stepped in and did their part. It's interesting how often companies can be cheap with things that matter. Getting fired isn't ideal, but it seems like it didn't affect you much in the long run. It's always good to connect with others through those shared experiences in interviews. Makes it feel less personal.
Me and a roommate worked roughly the same shift at a big box store. He was on a 24-hour insulin pump, and if he forgot to eat, then he would go into shock. So the night manager makes me call him to see if he was going to make his shift. I get another roommate instead who is losing her shit because he won't wake up. I call 911 and then tell the manger I'm leaving to make sure he is alright. Manger threatens to fire me. Day manager, who hasn't left, tells me to go. I get there as the paramedics arrive and shoot my roommate up with sugar to wake him, and then I have to spend the next 8 hours keeping him awake and fed so he doesn't go into shock again. Next day of the night, Manger calls me into the office and tries to take my pay away and take away 2 weeks of work. He violates my company right to have another associate there as my witness and even pulls in a non-involved manager to berate me as well.
That sounds pretty rough. You had to look out for your roommate in a real emergency, and then you faced a lot of heat for it afterward. It's wild that the managers didn't see the bigger picture. Helping a friend should come first, but that's not how they saw it. It must have been frustrating having to deal with that situation and the fallout after. Just a tough spot all around.
First day of kindergarten, I patted my friend on the shoulder and told her she was a great friend. She ran to the teacher and told her I had hit her. I had to sit on the red step for an hour and thus began my school career. I am sure there are more impressive good deeds I've gotten in trouble for, but this one still really bothers me for some reason. LOL.
That's a rough start to school. Kids can be pretty dramatic, and it's wild how quickly things escalate. You were just trying to be nice, and it backfired. It's funny how a small moment like that can stick with you over time. It's like you went from being friendly to sitting on the red step in no time. Kids really don't grasp the nuances of friendship yet.
I was on a forum for reality TV and decided to listen to one of the members who had come to me in the time of need. He had depression, a bad home life, and I felt sorry for him, so I decided to help out. After 2 weeks, there was nothing more that needed to be said, and he had told me that he no longer needed to vent and thank me. He seemed happier, and I was glad. No more than 2 days later, he begins to talk a ton of shit about me on the forums. Not only was he lying, but he was making fun of me as well. I told everyone the basics of what went down, not specifically about his depression, home life, or anything that was super personal, and called him out for his ignorance. Admins did nothing about the argument.
It's wild how people can switch up like that. You try to be supportive, and then they turn around and start trashing you. It's disappointing, especially when you open up and help someone. You just wanted to be there for him, and he flipped the script. Sometimes, it feels like kindness can backfire. In the end, you just have to move on and not let it get to you too much.
Milliampere-Stunden, Mann. I was an RA too. A guy was suicidal, but texted me goodbye before he was going to end himself. Caught up with him in the parking lot and jumped in his car. Told him I'd buy him some smokes and we could talk it out. When he went to get cigs, I saw that he had a loaded gun next to him. We went back to campus and he went to say goodbye to this girl he liked. I called the cops, they circled him and got the gun off campus. The girl he liked ended up getting engaged to him later. Afterwards, he sent me a death threat. Him and the girl are both drug addicts now. After it happened, I didn't get a thank you. I got asked if I wanted to step down from my position or go through therapy and then talking to the dean of the college. Didn't even get one thank you and had to plead with them to let me continue my job. Ended up saving another guy from suicide later that year.
That sounds pretty intense. I can't imagine how you felt in that moment, trying to help someone in that state. It's wild how things turned out, with him sending a threat afterward. Sometimes people just don't get it, you know? You stepped up when it mattered, but it seems like the college didn't really recognize that. At least you saved another guy later on. It's something, I guess.
Residential life. I was an RA for an all-male freshman dorm. The amount of residents I called for alcohol poisoning was staggering. Their friends would call us when their buddies would go unresponsive, and we'd call the ambulance and have them rush to the hospital. And then they call me the bad guy for ruining their fun. Uneasy face. I love that job, but the save me please. But fuck you for doing it attitude was annoying. Edit. My rules were simple. If I don't hear it, see it, or smell it, I won't do anything. You'd be surprised how many freshmen would just leave their doors open while chugging vodka, or smoking pot, or having sex with cake, or playing beer pong. And yes, a guy did have sex with a cake. The whole cake. Edit. Words and correcting autocorrect.
Sounds like you had a wild time as an RA. It's ironic how people want help but then get upset with you for doing your job. Freshmen can be reckless, leaving their doors open during all kinds of activities. Can't believe someone actually went that far with a cake. Guess there's no limit to what people will do when they think they're being sneaky. Just part of the college experience, I guess.
I tried doing a much longer response to this, but it seems to have disappeared when Alien Blue crashed. I'm an RHD, and I'm sorry you had to deal with that. I don't have any excuses for your housing department, but it can be really hard to handle something like this. We train our RAs on suicide and suicide language so much because it's become a big issue on our campus. They know what questions to ask that person and who to immediately contact, but reality is rarely so forgiving or black and white. I've lost students to suicide and helped others get support. It's never easy to deal with no matter the outcome. I fight for RAs who deal with this kind of stuff. You're not a trained professional, trained in how to get a professional on scene, but you shouldn't scold it for something like this. Thanks for fighting the good fight. It's a rough type of work and requires a lot of your mental strength. It's exhausting to always be on your game.
It's tough dealing with these situations. I've seen friends struggle with mental health, and it's not as clear-cut as it seems. Sometimes, just being there for someone can make a difference, even if you don't have all the answers. It can weigh on you too, feeling responsible. You want to help, but it's hard when you're not a professional. There's a lot of strength needed to get through it all.
You up. A girl was screaming at her boyfriend, like screaming at the top of her lungs bloody murder. Knew she had some issues, knocked on the door after her boyfriend left, and just talked with her and her suicidal tendencies and everything in between for 3 hours, until like 4 a.m. Reported it straight afterwards as a separate report rather than just a straight IR, though it was submitted like one. This report goes to the counseling services on campus. And I got written up because I didn't submit an incident report for the potential noise violation.
That sounds pretty intense. It's tough dealing with situations like that, especially at such late hours. I guess you were just trying to help, but the noise violation part is kind of a bummer. It's hard to balance looking out for someone with following the rules. Hopefully, she got the help she needed afterward. Sometimes, being there for someone can be more important than the technicalities.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.